A very happy Derby, Stats Race Lens users, live from Louisville, because I'm not at Churchill Downs. Dan Tordjman is. So I can't say that we're live from Churchill personally, at least right now. But we hope that you're excited about Oaks and Derby weekend. Everything is in place, and we're going to help you, we hope, put together some winning plays for Friday and Saturday. Craig Walker, Dan Tordjman, myself, and in a little bit, Laffit Pincay III, LT3, who's with the NBC crew as we speak. Usually he gets finished at about 6:30, bottom of the hour. So we'll have Laffit join us, and we certainly will save the Derby for the second half at least of tonight's visit. And in addition to the Derby, of course, we're going to look at the American Turf. We'll look at the Turf Classic. We'll talk the Oaks, and we'll take some questions too. If people have individual questions about horses, Derby horses, Oaks horses, wager structure, anything you want to do. And last year, I think we went for a good hour and 40 minutes. So get tied on. We're looking forward to spending this next little while with you and with Stats Race Lens and giving you the ammunition that you're looking for this weekend. We can't tell you too much right now about the weather. It's a little volatile. Frankly, we've already dodged the Derby thunderstorm prospect. So don't worry right now about the prospects for wet weather, because in this area, until the storm actually passes over Churchill, there's never a guarantee. Let me say good evening, first of all, to Dan Tordjman.
How's it going, Steve? How we doing? I'm absolutely pumped, and the way you built it up kind of made me think. I was envisioning kind of that slow climb up the roller coaster, and I'm just ready for this ride to start. I feel like we've been here forever. I want the races to go off. I'm excited for this weekend.
Well, everyone seems to agree, and we'll take a survey and certainly get attendees' views and listen to the input about what kind of a group that we're looking at when it comes to this Derby. I had Andy Beyer on the radio this morning, and when a guy that's been around as long as Andy Beyer is excited about a group of 3-year-olds in a Derby, that tells you a lot, and that gives you the kind of indication of what we have in store coming up on Saturday, and certainly well in advance of Saturday's action. Tomorrow's card, just spectacular. Craig Walker, good evening.
Hey, Steve. How's it going?
No complaints. I've been here 2 weeks, and like Dan says, let's get ready to rumble. And one of the fun things that the Stats Race Lens product can do on cards like this, it really helps identify horses to key around. One of the things that we've spent a lot of time doing, really the whole time I've been here with the show, is talking about having a plan and attacking these two cards. And before we even handicap, I do want to do a little bit of that. But first, let me make a flash sale offer for everybody using a promo code Derby18. 50% off any subscription, and in 1 month in particular, if you are a new subscriber, the Derby 18 code will get you 2 months for that 50% off price. And so this is only a Thursday flash sale for the Derby Oaks webinar. Your code again, Derby 18. So if you're thinking about subscribing, this is a perfect place, and obviously it'll get you through Preakness as well and right up until the doorstep of Belmont. And if you're a new subscriber, it'll take you through June as well. Craig, from your experience, describe to attendees your wagering strategies typically for Derby individually and collectively on the weekend.
Yeah, for me, Really, the last, I guess 3 or 4 years is when I've really been kind of honing. As we've gone to these big race days where instead of just having one or two, graded races on a day, where we're having five and six, you know, big races. I've really started keen on wagering more on those days, and like you said, have a game plan. I mean, it can be different for each type of day, but in general, I tend to bet more money in the pick threes, the pick fours, those type of races. So I'm trying to find races where I can play a horse heavily. And so like in that, I know in our last webinar, like Sister Charlie was that horse for me, and so that helped me have a good day just because I was able to key that horse. So that's kind of what I'm looking for. And a lot of times it may be a horse that the actual race lens algorithms select, or it may be just one that I have different angles that I've found on my own, and that the horse to me becomes a strong play because of those factors. So that's the type of stuff I'm looking for.
Your budget and the allocation of your bankroll. What's your strategy there, and how much do you heavy up your bankroll for the 2 days and specifically for Derby?
Yeah, for the Derby is becoming I think more for me than it used to be. I just wasn't I was more a Breeders' Cup fan, and that was those were the 2 days that I really heavily bet. And then, like I said, a few years ago, I started getting more into the the 3 days of the Triple Crown, the Belmont Super Saturdays, those types of races. I've uh, gone a lot more for. So I kind of have I don't bet as much as I used to on the everyday type of betting, and I really try to ramp it up for these types of days. So the Breeders' Cup is always still my top 2 days, but now these days are much closer to that type of betting rather than just the day in and day out betting. It's just the pools are so big, and the field sizes are so big, and the competitions so well matched a lot of the times that that's just kind of the way that I've gone with these types of bets and these days.
Now, when they drew the Saturday card Tuesday at Churchill, when the overnight came out, I sent out a tweet, tongue in cheek, saying, "Oh, look, there's one of those 14 by 14 by 10 by 20 pick fours that you see so often, a pick four sequence with 39,200 combinations." And that, of course, is the series of races that culminate with the Derby on Saturday. Dan Tordjman, talk a little bit about your evolution approaching Derby and the bankroll approach. How much against the potential win bet, cover bet, exotics when it comes to Derby. Talk about your approach. You've always been in your writing and when you're reaching out to prospective players and particularly to new players, you try to give them some smaller budget concepts, and it's something that people really they don't get enough of. They're being told all the things about the horses themselves, but not really so much that they might need about how to apply their money when it comes to making their decision.
Yeah, absolutely. So I mean, I think it's important for me. I mean, I'm somebody who's on the sort of the wagering education side and the fan development side, and so you realize naturally that there are a lot of people who are coming into Derby, and for them it's either their first time betting, or it's the one day in the year where they're truly going to make a significant investment for based on whatever their normal budget might be. And so, but I think for me, what I would tell anybody really is first do your handicapping, and then once you've identified the horse or horses that you like, I mean, you try to you just weigh weigh your bets accordingly. I mean, you basically, you're not going to spread your money out equally across 4 or 5 races if you have a stronger opinion in one of those races. This Derby in particular, I think it's extremely difficult to have a very strong opinion in the exotics. I mean, you're going to probably want to try to hone in on 1 or 2 horses and give yourself some opportunities to cash if 1 of 2 or 3 of those horses win. But yeah, I mean, look, if you do end up handicapping the Derby and you come up with, Lone Sailor or even a Hofburg or a Flame Away as one of your top choices, you might seriously consider a significant win play show bet. But that's only if you're truly confident that one of those horses is gonna put up a big effort. And so, I think it really all depends on who you land on and how confident you are, and then from there you could really start making decisions about how much your budget to allocate to those individual bets.
How much of a weekend bankroll, and you can use a mythical percentage, whether in dollars or percentage, however you want to structure it. How much will go against Derby, and how much will go against Friday, and then into multi-race wagers, etc. Break down perspective, and in typical 2 days like this, what goes where.
Yeah, I would say probably about 20 or 30% of my bankroll is going to go to multi-race wagers in which I can identify a single or 2 singles, and just basically a couple of other races that seem wide open. So, the late pick 4 sequence that you mentioned, that's an exciting one. That's one I want to get in on. So I might allocate the majority of I might just play the late sequences on both days and probably allocate about, maybe about 30% of my overall budget to that. And then I'm going to try to pick, I would say, some spots. You can't bet every race these next few days. If you do, you're gonna find yourself in a bit of trouble. I'm gonna try to identify maybe 5 or 6 races that I can seriously attack, and of that remaining 70% of my budget, I'm gonna probably go 40% to win place show wagers on horses that probably win place mostly on horses that I think represent value at good prices. And then I think that leaves us about 30%. And so with that remaining 30%, I'll probably mess around with the exotics, maybe allocate about 10% to that Derby Super. That's fun to chase. Even though I'm not generally a superfecta player, I will probably take a stab at the Derby Super just because the potential for a major score is there. So.
Well, we'll start the conversation, and I do want to answer some of the. There's some questions starting to pile in, and we'll answer them as we work. And one of the questions that came up, I started to type it a response, but I'll do it verbally. Ron Esterman's asking about the double entries, and I'll mention that Salty. I just talked to Mark Cassie before we came on the air. I think I kind of anticipated people would be curious. Salty is running on Friday. He is completely 50-50 with Awesome Slew running either in the Ali Sheba tomorrow or the Churchill Downs on Saturday. He absolutely is split down the middle, and he's really kind of struggling with it, and it's kind of a 2-part decision, because if he goes 2 turns in the Ali Sheba, it's with an idea of then turning back in the Metropolitan Handicap in New York on Belmonte, as opposed to keeping him 1 turn for now in the Churchill Downs, where he's probably going to be chasing Imperial Hint, as opposed to what happened against Army Mule, where he was chasing Army Mule all the way around. So the Cassie decision, Salty Friday, no decision yet on Awesome Slew, and you can 98% expect Rushing Fall running tomorrow in the Edgewood instead of against the boys, and even against the girls. And maybe we'll get a couple of thoughts in on that race too today, because she is vulnerable, and not even because of the 11 hole. She's vulnerable because there's at least 3 very, very good fillies in that race in the Edgewood. Let's talk about the feature tomorrow, though, and we'll start. Dan, start us off talking about. I think. Let me see on the. Let me go back to my list. And yeah, Dan, start off the Oaks conversation.
Yeah, so I think going in, it's funny. Every year there's all this discussion and debate around the post draw, and the post draw that we're talking about, of course, is the Derby post draw. And I think the takeaway for most people from the Derby post draw was that nothing overly eventful occurred during the post draw. I think the same can't be said though for the Oaks draw, which of course resulted with the favorite in Monomoy Girl drawing widest of all. So significant to the extent that she's going to have to work to get position. Obviously just not an ideal race to be drawn wide, and I think the added factor of a bona fide speed horse to her inside and Classy Act, I think makes the task a bit more challenging. And I have the feeling, although I've heard sort of differing opinions on this, that Heaven Is My Nikki might potentially complicate life as well too. And Heaven Is My Nikki is drawn to the inside of her as well. So anyhow, that being said, and combined with the fact that while impressed with her Ashland, the race didn't really show me, didn't really speak too much to her ability to handle pressure or to take pressure and sustain pressure going a mile and an eighth. I'm gonna take a stand against her and try to find a little bit of a price. And so the horse I land on actually is the one just to her inside, Eskimo Kisses. Eskimo Kisses, of course, will take back and make one run. When you look at how far back she was in the Ashland, we won't play the replay now, but if she was virtually off the screen. So if you get a moment, you haven't seen that race, take a look at it. And as mentioned, Monomoy Girl set a pretty a loose and a fairly reasonable pace for the caliber of field that she was running and the quality of horse that she is. Really uncontested, and to see virtually no one closing from the back aside from Eskimo Kisses is sort of striking visually. And so Eskimo Kisses one who I think was impressive there. And then also if you go back to the Fairgrounds Oaks, that was another race where just basically a half a stride past the wire, she was ahead of Chocolate Martini at a mile and a 16th. So it just seems to me that given the fact that we should probably suspect that an honest pace here, going a little bit longer, she looks like she wants every bit of it. You can see her Equibase speed figures there, going up from the performances last year, the 91, earlier in the year, the 91 up to 97, up to 98 in her most recent effort. She seems to be getting better. And as I mentioned, I think the distance will suit her. Craig, if we look at the true odds and we look at the pace projector here a little bit, I think it'll kind of help maybe help some of the viewers envision what we're discussing here. So, on this pace projector, you can see the early pace has Classy Act, on the lead, and then you can see the middle portion of the race. It has Monomoy Girl sort of clearing and being slightly ahead of Classy Act. But in order to do that, it's obviously going to require a lot of work. And so the horse here, in terms of the way Stats Raceland sees it, who's the one to beat is going to be Midnight Bisou, which would be my second choice here, and really my most logical choice. Obviously, just looking for a little bit of a price with Eskimo Kisses at 15-1 on the morning line. But Midnight Bisou, if you look at her number last out, the 107 Equibase speed figure, so I'll take a moment here to just get down to that portion of it. But anyhow, she's basically two noses away from being a perfect 5 for 5 in her career. You can see the number circled there, the Equibase speed figure. What that means is that that's the highest Equibase speed figure for any horse in this race. So in any race, so right there, obviously that's an impressive thing to note. And as I mentioned a moment ago, when you looked at the race projection, it looks like she'll be sitting a perfect trip. About either second or third flight, and should be able to benefit from what will be a lot of work being done early by Monomoy Girl. So for that reason, I think she's a logical player. Now, you'll also notice on the Craig, if we go back to that for just one moment, I was going to kind of point to the overlay, the yellow there. When you see the yellow, these yellow, when the odds are highlighted in yellow, what you're looking at are potential overlays. And the two of them that are listed as overlays are two horses that I think are quite interesting. Wonder Godot, who's a super game filly, has run a bunch of races, always hasn't won many recently, but is always there. And then Raya or Raya, maybe Steve can confirm the pronunciation once I'm done. But she's one, obviously, we know the story with her run in the UAE Derby. She finished ahead of some fairly highly regarded local runners, as well as Reride, who was sort of on the outside looking in here, the Derby picture. So she finished behind Mendelssohn, who's going to be one of your favorites in the Derby. I thought a pretty impressive effort from her, and when we go over the Derby, but having been there, actually having been fortunate enough to go to Dubai this year and witness that race, I thought she looked great there. I thought she looked extremely professional, and I know she finished 18 3/4 lengths behind, but or 18.5 lengths behind, but she finished ahead of some pretty solid horses, and horses that were certainly that were shorter prices than her as well. So I think she needs to be respected. First time Lasix as well. First time stateside for Baffert. We looked up some stats. Baffert, actually some pedigree stats on Tis Wonderful. We won't go to them, but they weren't overly impressive in terms of Tis Wonderful's fillies in particular at 3, going a mile and an eighth in stakes races. But there are some questions there, but she's one who's certainly interesting, and I think I would take a look at. And the last one that I would just mention is one that I kind of referenced earlier. That's Chocolate Martini. Maybe I'm speaking sentimentally here, kind of knowing the horse's story. A $25,000 claim a couple of months back by Tom Amis for a small ownership outfit, Double Doors Racing. Turning that horse into what Tom Amis has turned the horse into is extremely impressive, and you can't help but root for her. And on top of it, as I mentioned, the pace should be honest enough to where I think she's one of the logical players. Comes in well rested to make a run late and potentially grab a slice.
Correct.
Yeah, so I'm kind of on a couple of the horses that Dan mentioned. So first, I'd like to take a look at Midnight Bisou. So this horse, of course, is on a good roll. You can see Mike Smith has ridden this horse the last 3 times, and the horse has won easy. A grade 2, a grade 3, and a grade 1 race. I agree with Dan. I think the way the draw helped her, versus Monomoy Girl. I think she's gonna set in a good spot, and Monomoy Girl might have to put in some more work in the early going to get a good position. So I do like this horse, and the one of the main things on the horses that I mostly like in this race is the strong Equibase speed figures they're running. I mean, this horse, she ran a 105 and a 107 speed figure her last 2 times out. so those are very strong numbers compared to most of the field. There's really only two other horses who have been running any type of number close to those. One thing that the way that I handicap with these types of races, one thing that we do is whenever you for any race, when you look up at the top, you'll see this CR number, the 104. So that's what we call the class rating of the race. And the way to think of it is there are algorithms that try to determine what the winning speed figure will be. And so a 104 is considered, the likely speed figure that's going to happen. That, of course, it doesn't mean that it will or it won't, but that's just kind of a good way to, when you see that number, when you're looking at any individual horse, you can always compare the recent Equibase speed figures that the horse has been running, and that kind of gives you an idea. Okay, this horse fits this group, or if it's a horse that's stretching out for the first time and his numbers are less than that, but you think he's going to improve around 5 points, then you can see, okay, that'll be good enough to win today. It's always a good reference point to look at when you're trying to look at a horse's Equibase speed figures and analyze them. And so Midnight Bisou is my top choice. We go to Monomoy Girl. I mean, this horse, it's hard to fault the horse. I mean, it's done everything right. It lost by a neck the one time. Florent Giroux has been riding very well right now. Brad Cox is on a hot streak. So there are lots of things going for the horse. I just think, like Dan said, it is going to maybe for the first time have to kind of do more work early on. So we'll see how that affects the horse's finish. But if you look at the Equibase speed figures, 102, 104, 103, 107, those are all very strong numbers for affiliate at this time of year. And so that's the logical second horse. I do like Rhea. I do think that this for me, this is the horse that's the one to play to try to make money in this race. So, like when we're talking about, Steve was talking about how to make bets. Even though I don't think this is the most likely winner, I still am probably going to, just like how Dan is with Eskimo Kisses. I mean, this horse is going to be on more of my tickets maybe than the other two, just because it has good value and you're going to get paid more. It's not that I won't play the other two. It's just I always play my extra tickets trying to make a score most of the time. I mean, the only time that I'll do it with a favored horse is if the horse is like 8-5, and I think, the horse should be 3-5 or 4-5, something where it's an overlay that way, a low priced overlay. But in this field, I think the other prices are about right. So this is the horse that's probably going to be the one that I want to play to try to make some money with. You can see that for foreign races, so races that aren't in North America, we have an algorithm that does foreign speed figures on the same scale as the Equibase speed figures. And so you can see that this is the only other horse in the race that's running the numbers close to the other two contenders I talked about. So you can see the 106, 104, 103, the 98 last time is still a decent number considering that Mendelssohn won by 18.5 lengths. I am interested to see what Rhea does tomorrow, because I think that might influence me on how much to use Mendelssohn, even though it probably shouldn't make a difference. It just, for me, I think it is. It's gonna certify that was a big performance that Mendelssohn had, which I know it was, but it'd be nice if this horse was right there with Midnight Bisou and Monomoy Girl, then I think that big speed figure that Mendelssohn ran just really looks good, not just on paper, but it'll kind of be bona fide as well. And then one horse that Dan mentioned briefly was Wonder Godot. And this horse, this is one of these things that I use true odds for. So Dan mentioned it when he was speaking, and just when I see the horses, so it's a horse that's not necessarily picked in the top 1, 2, or 3, but it's highlighted. So because the morning line odds are higher than the adjusted true odds, and just so people know when the live odds start coming in on the race, that's what will get compared. The adjusted true odds will get compared to. So it right now it's just a possibility looking at the morning line odds, since those tend to be close, but of course they're not always. But when the live odds come in, that's what the adjusted true odds will get compared to see if it's an overlay or not. So that's always good to check. I mean, for me, I always have my phone with me at the track, and I'm pulling that up to see each race, just to see who the highlighted horses are. And so in this race, Wonder Godot is a possibility. So if it's going off, bigger than 13-1 odds, so 15, 20, 25 to 1, I'll throw that horse in exactas and tries with the other 3 horses, and that's the way I'll play the race. And that's mainly just because the Racelands algorithm likes that horse, and that's why that one I'm playing it. And I've had good luck doing that when I don't always have other reasons for liking the horse, and just the Racelands algorithms pointed out, I go along with it. I just tend to use this race projection screen and this data grid a lot in Racelands, and I don't agree with it 100% of the time, but I'd say 70% of the time I'm kind of going with some of what Racelands is recommending. So that's the way I look at this race. What do you have to add, Steve?
Well, Midnight Bisou, and later when it comes to Justify, it's very hard for me to go into these races not very excited about their prospects. It happens that I was at Santa Anita for both the Big Cap weekend as well as the Santa Anita Derby weekend, Santa Anita Derby and Oaks. The performance by Midnight Bisou in the Santa Anita Oaks is an absolute blueprint for winning this race tomorrow. And if for those that haven't seen it, if we want to utilize the replay system to watch her basically trail early and then drag Mike Smith into the turn and swoop around the field, that is a move that at this racetrack is an absolute winning move. And given the pace that's involved here, it seems that she can just basically relax early and make that one run. As it happens, she's tactical, and if we look at the pace projector, you can see that almost under any circumstance, she has got an advantage because of that tractability. I do see where there's the question that's being asked by Joe Solito on the chat about Monomoy Girl and her ability to rate. She's not rating from the 14 hole. She's got no choice but to go. And anybody that's watched her these 2 weeks leading into the race, she has been either ranked or close to ranked almost every single morning. She's been wanting to run off. And it seems impossible to conceive that she is somehow under, and as good as Florent Giroux is, with that turf rider touch, you can't ask her to go early to gain position and then to rate. If some of the inside speed goes and they can set up shop 3 wide, I think that if you ask Brad Cox right now, if I can be 3rd, 3 wide in the turn, he would take it. But I think once you ask her to go, you're fairly committed. And there is a lot of speed in here. I mean, for everybody that's talking about the pace boosting in the Derby because of horses that have a similar running style, you've got an infinite amount of horses in this race that want to be right on the lead. So I think it compromises Monomoy Girl quite a bit. And I don't see a scenario where she gets much of a chance to relax anywhere in this race. And for that reason, the Midnight Bisous and the Eskimo Kisses do make, and Wonder Gadot as well, make a lot of sense. The horse that I'm surprised that hasn't come up yet, that drew very, very well, is Coach Rocks. And Coach Rocks has made a very positive impression leading into the race. She's the horse that actually has a much more legitimate set of past performances that display tractability and versatility. She is a horse that can switch off a little bit, and you can foresee her under Luis Saez getting some early, probably mid-pack stalking position into the turn. Sassy Sienna with Stevens, she's a horse that's going to have to go. And if she clears off, that's going to set up a beautiful position for Coach Rocks on the rail with Saez. So Coach Rocks is probably the dangerous price that drew the best in this race. And I'm surprised that we don't have a little bit more attention paid to her. After that, I think you've hit all the highlights. Raya, Raya's a tiny little thing. I don't know what to do. Bob Baffert, I happen to have been with Baffert the first day that Raya hit the track at Santa Anita, and he really didn't know what to expect from her. And I can tell you that he didn't seem all that wowed by her physical presence from the time that that she had come to him. Now it's been 4 weeks, and there's another portion of Raya that I think is carrying some positive vibes, and that is her performance against Abel Tasman. Except there's a problem with that. Abel Tasman is coming into this looking really vulnerable, and for that reason, Raya, everybody, including myself at the time, thought, look at this, Raya gave Abel Tasman everything she could handle in a workout, except that the reports coming from California are that Abel Tasman doesn't seem as nearly as sharp and brilliant coming into the season as she did ending the season last year. So Raya, who at first I had some real interest in, I kind of have cooled on. I just think that from a pace, every time you look at this pace projector and you just watch that video, Midnight Bisou to me is way the filly to beat. And I mean, frankly, I'm rooting too. A guy like Bill Spar comes to this stage. Very rarely does a guy like Spar get a 3-year-old male or female and find himself in this position. And he is a masterful horseman. She blew out today a quarter of a mile. She looked terrific. And I'm all in on her. I think she's a major key in this race. And I think you've got some nice prices that you guys have identified to play around with in Eskimo Kisses, Wonder Gadot, and I'll throw in Coach Rocks. I want the 3 of them on my tickets as well. Let's turn our attention. We'll also get a nice feedback on the Oaks from Laffit when he joins us, and he should be here fairly soon. Let's turn the page and get to Saturday and talk about the American Turf. And there may be a horse in here that I think is a very likely winner and a helpful place in your multi-race wagers. Dan, let's start out with your approach to the American Turf.
All right. Well, I hope it's not the one that I'm about to give a negative angle on. So, okay. Craig, if you want to start off with Speed Franco, who actually is probably one of the more accomplished horses in this field. Speed Franco, just looking at, so we'll give it a second to load here so you could follow along as I'm speaking. But yeah, a really interesting field, and I think it's a great, I think, great betting race. Even if you identify one horse, the exotics here, and we talk about the exactas, the trifectas, could be anything. So I do like this race from a betting perspective. It does seem open. And so Speed Franco drawn the rail. You could see up in class there, right above the jockey's name. But if you look at trainer Gustavo Delgado, I was interested specifically because when you look at Speed Franco, for example, and most of Delgado's runners, obviously they're based at Gulfstream. So these races at Gulfstream and maybe how they might stack up with some of these other horses coming in from other places. But the trainer in particular with Delgado did a little bit of research looking at his shippers over the past 5 years in stakes races, just to get a sense for how often he's made a move like this, taking a horse from Florida and shipping into another jurisdiction for a stakes race, and you can see there's a pretty decent sample size there. It's 21 starts. What's highly discouraging is the goose egg underneath the win column, and you also have only 2 runners in the money. So you could use some of this research here to I wouldn't use this research sort of as the only sort of measuring stick of a horse's chances of winning or losing. But if you were trying to make a decision on a horse and you were kind of lukewarm on Speed Franco for whatever reason, maybe perhaps because you think that there's other pace in the race and it's going to be hard for Speed Franco from the rail to get to the lead and stay there with pressure, which is kind of the way I had him pegged to begin with. Now you look at that stat and you're sort of extra discouraged. And so that was just something I wanted to point out on Speed Franco. The horse that I do like in here is Captivating Moon. So Captivating Moon is now up on the screen, the 9. You can see posted a 102 Equibase speed figure, which was the 3rd straight ascending speed figure there. You see them just going up again, 88, 97, 102, 102 in the Transylvania. And you could look on the right there. I pointed this kind of nifty little feature of Stats Race Lens out before, but again, the trouble indicator, if you missed any of these races, you look at those last 3 races, all 3 of them have the trouble indicator red arrow on there pointing up, indicating that Captivating Moon at one point or another during the race felt was perhaps inhibited or in some way had a tough trip. And so that I've gone back and I've watched all these replays. If you're using stats, I would recommend going in and watching those replays as well. You can kind of make a decision for yourself, but you can see you just even look 2 back, losing to Guido, a very highly regarded horse, by a length and 3/4. But watch that race play out and see if there's anything there that tells you, look, had the race been run differently, perhaps, him coming from as far off as he did, you could perhaps make the case that maybe he could have won that race. And then you look at the horse that finished behind him coming back to win next out. And then you look at the last race again, the Transylvania, losing to Analyze It, who could be, something extra special, finishing second to Analyze It after, rallying wide late. Not that he was ever catching Analyze It, but that move and that race, I think, is impressive. And so, if we're going to use Analyze It as the bar, it's a pretty high bar. And, for one, again, projecting that there will be a lot of pace in this race, I think Captivating Moon is a pretty interesting horse. So I do like Captivating Moon here. We're seeing 6-1 on the morning line. I think we should get something in that range. So that's a square enough price for me. The only other horse I'd mention here is a bit of a long shot. And I, maybe I'm just taking a stab here, but Arawak, that name sounds familiar. He's appeared in a couple of races on the Derby Trail, in the Jeff Ruby, and also in the Bluegrass last out. And the Bluegrass was on that smoking hot pace with Flame Away. Of course, Flame Away stayed, and Arawak plummeted to the back of the field. But did a little trainer search here on Doug O'Neill. And if you click on, here we go, we got that. Use today's jockey. We could pull up some stats here that I can't remember the exact case that we looked at a little while back, but we looked at a case where it was a trainer using a jockey who he didn't normally use, and so over here it's Doug O'Neill using Gary Stevens. And Craig, if we go back to it for just one moment.
That kind of reset on the wrong thing. So hold on.
Did it? Okay, sorry about that. Yeah, the whole. Yeah. I looked away for a second and the thing went down. Okay. But anyhow, the logic being, you see Gary Stevens riding for Doug O'Neill outside of California, and so if you follow Doug O'Neill, and anytime Doug O'Neill is got a horse in a major spot outside of California, it's usually Mario Gutierrez who's riding, and so I just kind of wonder why was it that Gary Stevens was was riding and was able to pull up some statistics that essentially back up the theory that outside of California, when Doug O'Neill has used Gary Stevens in stakes races, the horses have all been pretty legitimate horses, and they've run solid races. And so we'll give it a shot here again to see if we could pull it up. But essentially, the statistics that you will see will be that in 13 starts.
It's just not working. For some reason, it's not.
It's not working. Yeah, it's fine. I'll just let everybody know what the stats show, that in 13 starts, 5 of the horses have finished in the money, 2 have won, which on its face may not sound like anything spectacular, but 4 of the starters were outside of California, and 3 of them finished first or second. So of the 4 times that Gary Stevens has ridden for Doug O'Neill outside of California in I can't recall if they were all stakes races or not, but of the 4 times that he's ridden for him, 3 of them have finished first or second. So I thought that was a positive sign, and it's totally kind of like a hunch play. And I look and really just looking back on the horse's synthetic form, it was obviously better than his dirt form. So if you believe that the synthetic and then the turf race 4 back there, if you think the synthetic form is going to kind of translate into ability on the turf, which is conventional thinking, of course, then you would expect a much better effort from Arawak, and he's going to be completely overlooked in the wagering. And so he's another one who, from off the pace, which is, I think, his more traditional running style here, at least being a few lengths off of it, he could make a bit of an impact. But yeah, those were my general thoughts here. Just kind of one sort of strong feeling and one stab. How about you, Craig?
Yeah, so I start off looking at the True Odds, the race projection screen and the data grid for this race, and kind of my top 2 horses are coming off of this race, off of this information. So as Steve mentioned before, Rushing Fall is gonna race on Friday. It's not gonna race in this race. So throwing that horse out, the first 2 horses I like are number 6 and number 2, and they're the top 2 picks, and they're both highlighted as possible overlays. I like that about them, and I like that the way that they the trips that they look like they're going to get on the race projection screen. So the 2 Inscom projects to have the lead, and the 6 right behind River Boyne. So that's what I like, that Race Lens is projecting these 2 horses to do well, and also that they're gonna be in what should be, it looks like, a normal type of pace. They're going to be near the lead on a pretty strung out field, which I think will be a reasonable pace. So I like that about them. When I look at the PPs, one other thing I like about River Boyne, let me jump to him. One moment. So one of the other things that we have in Racelands, we have individual research and summary research. So summary research information, you can access it by clicking on the research um, button up here, but also it's always going to be in your PPs, whatever defaults that you have set them for. So for Jeff Mullins, this is information for today. The other summary research information is for the Jockey Siren Dam is over here. When you're looking at individual research, it'll be down below here where it says research for today's horse. There's more stats down there too. So these things are always matching up with something that's happening today. And so one good thing about Jeff Mullins here, when you look, this is for the past 3 years. This is the defaults that I have set up, and it matches for turf routes, graded stakes. He has a nice win percentage of 27% out of 26 starts, and a plus 4% ROI. So those are it's not a huge number of starters, but it's a pretty good sample size, and for that type of number, this is the type of race that he knows how to get a horse ready for. We'll go jump to number 2 again. So Inscombe, this as we said on the pace, he looked like he was going to have a chance to be on or near the early lead. Was highlighted in yellow as possible overlay. And also one other thing I kind of like about when I'm looking at like either slow pace races or races where a horse may be on or near the lead, I like to look at to see how jockey's been doing. So when we look at the last 30 days for Joel Rosario, he's riding very well right now. 23% winners overall out of the last 30 days, out of 82 starts, and a plus 20% ROI. So that's all strong information, and so that's the other thing that I like about him. There's 2 other horses I like, and it's basically based on angles. And so Graham Motion, you can see here, some of the angles I have are also the situational stats that are showing up here. So whenever the defaults are for everything to be green when they're highly positive. So the win percents, these positive ROIs, and even the ones that are negative or slightly negative, they're still above average compared to the average trainer. They're highly above average. So those are all good signs. Some of these angles I already have programmed into my angles, and so you can see in turf stakes how well he does his ROI, and using Jose LRT how well he does. And so those are things that I like about that horse. And then the other horse that Dan mentioned that I do like is Arawak. And one thing is you can see that this angle that I have, Doug O'Neill for the last year going dirt to turf, he has a positive 54% return on investment. So that's a very strong angle that I like a lot. And also, when you look at individual research for him, you can see down here there's this stat where he's 16% winners and a plus 53% return on investment. When you mouse over it, you'll see that that's in the last 5 years when he takes blinkers off and the horse has been coming off an 8 to 30 day layoff. So these things are all programmed already, depending on how you have your individual research and summary research settings set up. So just know that you do have control over those. You know, sometimes people don't know. You have control of how the ones that are highlighted here in orange, and then this group down here in orange. You actually, as a user, can go into your customized PPs and go into the settings and actually control how those statistics are displayed, how many filters are involved, which filters are more important than others. You have a lot of control over that, and so that's one of the things we always want to emphasize about Racelands is it's set up for you to handicap the way you want and to use the way you want, and and that's what that's the way we really want to help you the most, is that you set it up for things that are important to you. And that's all I have for that race.
Well, I'll only add, for those that are interested in Arawak, saw him on track yesterday after the Derby Oaks training session, and to the point where I texted Doug O'Neill and I said, who's that horse on track with the red shadow roll? He made a very nice impression. All of that said, regarding this edition of the American Turf, River Boyne is going to throttle this field and every field that he comes in contact with. This is a talent on the level of Justify and Mendelssohn when it comes to the dirt, and he will not lose. It'll take a traffic issue or an incident to keep River Boyne from winning this race Saturday. I have seen enough of him in person so far this year. I guess I'll put it in the same category I did seeing Midnight Bizou and Justify. This is a scary talent, and if we get 5-1 on this horse, it'll be something you'll talk about the rest of your horse playing live.
I like it.
And that's all I got to say about that. Let's talk about the Pathé Mile, because this is a fun race. 14 horses, and when it comes to the Pathé Mile, the horses that are turning back, you got horses that are stretching out from sprint distances. This is a unique opportunity, and we can have some fun in here. There's a lot of interesting horses coming from all points on the compass. They're heading in all different directions. Craig, go on with it. Start off the Pathé conversation.
So for me, this is another race where I'm kind of just going with what Racelens recommends, similar to the last race where I went with River Boyne and Inscombe. This race I'm going to go with the two top horses that it selects, and both are highlighted as likely overlays. And in this instance, you have one that kind of is separated from the other one. So number 12, Restoring Hope, is the one that I like a lot. If I go look at the PPs, I'm just going to take a second here. So we have, I think there was a lot of the webinars last year, and maybe a couple times this year already, where these certain types of Baffert horses, I mean, his stats have stood out. We've had these angles going now for a year and a half at least, I know, and so when Baffert ships a horse in for graded stakes, super tough. Same thing when Mike Smith rides for him, and I mean, you think people would always be betting them, but I mean, they keep having positive returns on investment, and so I just when the horse looks good on paper and has that going for it, it's hard to bet against it. So that's what I like about that horse. Just lots of high positive angles. Even the blinkers on in a small amount of starts, but that's all still positive as well. And then the other horse I like, as I mentioned before, is Mississippi. And if we look at one good thing about this horse is that second race back, that big improvement it made going from 98 to 100 to 111 Equibase speed figure. That number is, I mentioned before, comparing it to the class rating, that's much higher than the class rating. So for sure, that effort to a repeat of that is good enough to win. The last race, the pace was pretty fast in that Florida Derby. So those numbers, the pace figures there of 128, 104, which is what Mississippi ran, reflect that. So I think to be up there and still to hold his own was a good effort, and that was against Audible and Hofberg. So I think this horse, especially at 10-1, is definitely one of the main contenders.
Let's pause for a second and
good.
Hold on one sec, Dan. I want to welcome in Laffit Pincay III, who just joined us, freed from his NBC responsibilities. Laffit, welcome.
How's it going, guys? Happy Derby week. Apologies
Happy
for
Derby.
the late arrival. We got up at 6:30, and a couple of things to tie up, but excited to be part of the webinar. And it is Christmas for horse players, as you guys know. So exciting.
We're just talking about the Pat Day Mile, and Craig talked about restoring hope in Mississippi. Let's get Dan's thoughts, and then we'll circle back and get a couple of opinions for you before we move to the double, to the Turf Classic and the Derby. Dan, your Pat Day thoughts?
Yeah, just a couple of quick thoughts from me. The horse that I'm going with is Sporting Chance. We can see, again, I brought these up a couple of moments ago, but the trouble indicator there on the right, most of us, I would imagine, have seen the race here, the Toyota Bluegrass, where he, ducks out pretty badly in the stretch. Was clearly tired, and it really kind of was a very dramatic, visually dramatic confirmation of what we'd pretty much seen from him in the Rebel and the Southwest. Just him wanting certainly no part of a mile and an eighth. So I think the cutback here is going to help. And we could look. I mean, he's got class going back to last year. Winning the hopeful there. I think he's an extremely solid horse. It's just he was going a distance that he probably just isn't made to go. So I think he's one who enjoys the cutback. And then the other one who's just an extreme long shot, but we talked earlier about just trying to find some horses that might kind of spice up your multi-race wagers, and that's New York Central, 30-1 in the morning line. I distinctly remember the race 2 back because it knocked me out of a nice pick 4 score. So this was one where this horse was super game, was kind of headed in the lane, and then re-rallied. Really gutsy effort to win. The rail was good that day, but again, was very impressive how he was passing and then came back. And then, Sunland Derby, maybe he regressed slightly because that was such a big effort at Oaklawn, but maybe it was just that, just didn't like running at Sunland. So, I would expect a bounce back effort here from New York Central, because if you put a line through the Sunland Derby, his numbers really aren't that far off the rest of these. So I think a lot of people are just going to stop at the Sunland Derby. But this is a horse who I think can hit the board at a massive price. So those would be the two that I kind of had my eyes on here.
Laffit, some Pat Day thoughts?
Yeah, what was the conversation a few weeks ago that this looked like it would be like one of the best betting races of the entire day, and in the end it comes down to Mask and how talented he is, the big things expected this season. Yeah, I keep coming back to Mask. I believe in his ability. Obviously, Brown, who has been unconscious coming off the big Keeneland meet, and you could see it coming with how little he ran at Gulfstream. The guy's out of his mind right now. And with Hyder Castellano, the speed towards the outside, I like the trip that he figures to get. I think that I'm interested to watch what the wagering looks like early on, because it's deep waters he's coming back in. So this is one of those races where you let the tote board, I think, a little bit dictate the approach. So I'm definitely using Mask, but a lot, depending on how I do this weekend, is going to be based on how good that Florida Derby truly was. In the Derby, I give Audible a big look. As a long shot coming from well off the pace, I give Hofberg a chance to cause some damage late. I'm a believer in the Florida Derby for the horses exiting the race. And Mississippi, who had to break from the outside post position in the Florida Derby, yeah, he was beat 10 lengths. That's fine. Third, though, behind Audible and Hofberg. This is a good colt. Mark Casse, who's running about 132 horses this weekend, seemingly. Mississippi with Julian Leparoux, I will use. Mask is going to be involved, but that win here at Churchill Downs and the recency, the fact that he's raced just 5 weeks ago, maybe that gives him the edge. I think Mask is a more talented racehorse. Mississippi, I think with the recency and how demanding that one-turn mile truly can be, I give him a big shot for Coolmore and what could be a big day. Derek Smith involved, obviously, with the ownership, depending on what we see from Mendelssohn in the Derby.
I can't really add all that much to what's been brought out here. I think everybody's brought out some interesting horses. The one runner in here that is going to be overlooked because of the slightly obscure connection, meaning Phil Bauer, Madison's Luna. Go back and watch the Hutchison, and that was a jaw-dropping performance that is absolutely on a par with all the best efforts that are brought into this race. And there's nothing that says the 7/8 is any issue for him. The fact that he rated the way he did even in his debut at Tampa, then came back and was so impressive against what looked like a decent group in the Hutchison. I'm going to bet that Madison's Luna goes off at an overlaid odd when it comes time in this field of 14, just because nobody really knows much about Phil Bauer. And I would be very respectful of Madison's Luna, because that race is as good as what Mask has run. It's as good as National Flag's effort. It's as good as the best races that Sporting Chance has run, either one turn or two turns. So just be aware, because he's okay. And I'm going to also point out another slight obscurity that's going to be a monster price. Smart Remark, Vicky Oliver for her father. Nothing wrong with that gelding's effort at Keeneland going the 7/8. And I got to think that Smart Remark, if you're looking for a monster price along the lines of what Dan brought out with New York Central, who was a horse that looked like he might make some noise. Look that he went at 11-2. He went off at Sunland, coming off of that important race where he beat Transgress. That came at Oaklawn on the what was that? That was the Southwest undercard. So, or the next day, I think. So
it was the same day.
A couple of prices.
Oh yeah. Yep.
Yeah, it's a wonderful. As always, I mean, this has been a very good move what Churchill did with the old Derby trial, slapping Pat Day's name on it with his great history and the reverential position he holds in Churchill Downs history, and with the horse players and fans here in the Ville. So another great addition of the Pat Day Mile. Before we talk about the Old Forester Turf Classic, it's going to take probably about 6 years before we're able to associate Old Forester instead of Woodford Reserve with the Turf Classic. I'm still calling the American Turf the Crown Royal.
Old habits.
Give us an Oaks opinion, Laffit, because we spent a good period of time talking about the Oaks, and we certainly don't want your thoughts in there going for naught.
Listen, I'm not. It makes no difference to me where horses are based when they win big races. I don't root for horse A over horse B because horse A happens to be stable 15 minutes from my house. Like, my days of rooting ended like when my father retired, right? So I don't have a vested interest. This isn't a Bill Spar thing. This isn't a California thing. This is a Midnight Bizou thing. and what she was able to do to turn it on, that acceleration that you see almost like a grass horse when she really finds her stride. And that performance in the Santa Anita Oaks was jaw-dropping. I thought it was great that Bill Sparr was almost forced to be involved in that short period of time in which the Oaks and Derby horses could be on the track, because he wanted to do his thing at 2:30 in the morning. This is such a big opportunity for Sparr. And yes, of course, he and my father are good friends. My father probably goes to Northern California to break Russell Baze's record, to break Bill Shoemaker's record had Bill Sparr, not been there. He was a huge part of the support. But again, this isn't about rooting. This is about Midnight Bizou, and whether it's the Kentucky Oaks or the Kentucky Derby, those horses that can turn it on the turn, those horses that can bank the way California Chrome used to. If you like my boy Jack a little bit in the Derby, look the way he accelerated on the turn at Fairgrounds in the Louisiana Derby. That move before the race was over, Steve, we might have actually watched it together right after the Santa Anita Derby over on the first turn there at Santa Anita. I decided then Midnight Bizou was my filly for the Kentucky Oaks. This isn't, she's going to be the second choice. Who knows? Maybe favorite. I am all in on Midnight Bizou for the Oaks.
You and me both. Let's turn our attention to the Old Forster Turf Classic. And, of course, the Oaks, the Turf Classic, and the Derby. That's a pick three opportunity. There's also what is the Bourbon? What's the Bourbon bet? There's a wager hooking the Turf Classic with Bourbon. I guess where is it? The Bourbon Double, they called it. All right, I'll work on that, and in the meantime, let me figure out what that Bourbon Double was.
Yeah, maybe that was just a drink you had, Steve.
I don't know. Maybe they're calling the Turf Classic and the Derby the Bourbon Double because of both, the Old Forster and the Woodford Reserve. But I saw a thing. Let me look on the website. The link that I gave out yesterday with the wagering menu. They were calling it the Bourbon, and I thought it was another 2-day bet that was not getting publicized. And by the way, folks, do not forget that tomorrow you do have advanced wagering on Saturday's card tomorrow. So don't forget that. You can get down for Saturday, the advanced Derby wagering tomorrow.
Cool.
And start
you guys want me to jump into the Turf Classic real quick? Okay. Yeah, so just like, the Pate Mile, I'll just kind of throw out a horse that seems logical to me and then a little bit of a stab. So the horse that I landed on is the 3 Kurilov. I thought this one ran a massive race last out in the Gulfstream Park Turf. If you haven't watched the replay, watch it. Heart to Heart, who, as we know, is all heart, super gutsy, very fun horse. Gets to the lead, has to work for it a little bit, but then kind of, does the usual Heart to Heart thing, which is slowing things down. And really from there, kind of essentially pulling away and as usual was, kind of just fought all the way to the wire. But Kurilov did come close. And watching at least, and Steve, you could probably, add a little more color to this, but watching the turf course over the past week, the past few days, it seems like it's played kindly to sort of these horses that are stalking on the rail or near the rail, kind of saving ground, second flight, not really deep closers. And to me, Kurilov kind of fits that bill. I see Kurilov sitting right behind the pace here. And so for that reason, and I mean, look, you just go back. Yeah, go ahead. Oh, sorry. Anyway, so, and there was just one other bit of research to back it up with. Greg, if you wanted to pull that up. Just looking at Chad Brown past 2 years, first off, a layoff of 45 plus days on the turf. Grade 1 stakes races, 37 starts, 8 wins, usual Chad numbers, 22% win percentage. And what's also impressive is the 23 in the money finishes. So, I mean, look, you're going to get a live horse here. You're going to get a horse that's going to finish in the money. And I think you're going to get a nice enough price to take a stab here and just hope that, the move comes at the right time, the pace is right, and that, Kurlov can kind of work out a nice trip, saving ground on the rail. The little bit of a price horse here that caught my eye was Arklow. I remember last year, Arklow at a big price as well, at 15-1, winning the American Turf, and just coming back to Churchill. You're looking there at the 111 Equibase speed figure. That's his best career race. No reason not to think that he'll come back and run another big race here. And I think he'll get overlooked again. It really just has the one allowance win to his credit since then, and so I would give him a look, and I think you're going to get a good price. So that's pretty straightforward on Arklow. But yeah, Kurlov would be my top choice here. So, Greg.
Yeah, Laffit, go ahead with who you like.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, I went into last year's Arlington Million thinking, DeVille couldn't lose. And he was defeated that day, and he hasn't won since. Looking at race shape, shining copper, and the speed that he's going to bring to the party. From a pace standpoint, I'm looking for somebody to come from a little bit further off the pace. Beach Patrol, he's going to be right up there as he normally is. And how what a classy racehorse, and for whatever reasons it feels like people don't buy in, and I'm not buying in, not in this case. This is where I'm taking a shot. This is where I smell an upset. I've been a sucker and such a big fan of Yoshida's since he first introduced himself in that Murphy on the undercard of the Preakness Stakes last year. I like the setup for him. I like that closing style that he has. I liked his Hill Prince victory back in last fall. We haven't seen him since, but he's shown us the ability to run well fresh. I would have liked to have seen a little bit more in the Belmont Derby, 1.25 miles, but Oscar Performance controlled things. The pace was really, really slow. I think everything kind of worked against him here. While I'm not going to reach for a value horse or for a price that I feel like I'm reaching in the Oaks, I'm probably not going to do it in the Derby either. Here's where I take a shot. And you have the human element intact. And what an interesting combination with Jose Ortiz and Bill Mott. Bill Mott, who's won how many races at Churchill Downs, held the record for most wins until last November when Dale Romans finally surpassed him. And I think Jose Ortiz has, just a handful here. And how long Bill Mott's been doing his thing, and one of the best trainers we've seen. And Jose Ortiz, we're just seeing the tip of the iceberg. The Eclipse Award win last year, riding a contender in Good Magic. Leaning on these two guys to come together here with Yoshida and maybe finally see that breakthrough performance. And it's been a while, and it's been a little bit disappointing. Maybe he's never quite evolved in what we thought he would be after we saw him in the Murphy. Taking a shot at Yoshida to light up the toe port a little bit in the race that I will probably go to my dying day calling the Turf Classic.
I've struggled with this a little bit. I know I'm going to have to deal with Beach Patrol. Hard not to take a long look at DeVille in here as well. And he certainly drew well for the cozy trip inside. I don't have I've got nothing clever, honestly, to impart on the Turf Classic. I don't feel as strongly about it as I did the American Turf. That gets us to Saturday's feature. And the 144th Kentucky Derby. And Laffit, going back to the introduction, we spent some time kind of massaging around our bankroll approach, how much we spend on Derby versus the rest of the two-day card, how we apportion our money within the Derby, super, the $1 super, 50-cent try, ticket building. Before we start the conversation with Dan, let's get your approach. And for you, it's the end of 2 days, heavy duty days of broadcasting. But when it comes to a recommended Derby wagering strategy, whether it's this Derby and this interesting group of horses, or just in general, what are your thoughts about a Derby approach in general?
I think we can agree. Maybe we're willing to spend a little bit more betting on the Derby because it's the Kentucky Derby, and theoretically, all the value, these terrific racehorses that are going to be bigger numbers, longer odds than they would be in any other situation leading up to this point, or perhaps after. But it's the Derby, so I'm willing to spend a few hundred. You like to fall in love with a horse early and have that conviction going in. I don't necessarily know that I have that this year, but my strategy has been to find that horse somebody you really believe in. I'll play a trifecta. I will go single, all. It's a little bit lit. I think it's around 350, 375, somewhere in there. It worked out beautifully with Barbaro in 2006 with Bluegrass Cat and Steppenwolf for chasing him home at big odds. Last year, sadly, I got too busy and I was on to Always Dreaming, and that was the strategy. Always Dreaming, all, and I didn't get the bet down. That was a tough one to swallow. That was a tough one to live down, considering you had Looking at Lee at a monster price and Battle of Midway at a monster price. So I think you have to ask yourself, do you allow recent history to affect your handicapping? The fact that 5 straight favorites have won the Kentucky Derby, do you feel a little bit reluctant to reach? We went through a 2-decade period of time where the first thing you did was chuck the favorite. The favorite never won the Derby from what was it, 79, 80 until 2000. Now, for a lot of reasons, and that's a different conversation, probably more has to do with the point system than anything else. It's a truer run race, and the best horse is winning, which is a good thing. It's America's most important race. It shouldn't be a crapshoot. I'll be honest with you, I'm torn between 2, and I don't know which way I'm going yet. It's not all that creative. It's either Justify or Audible, and I don't know if it's one of those situations that I'm going to wake up and have that moment of, that's it. Justify, there's nothing that you can't find a vulnerability. If you're superstitious, great. If you believe in foundation, yeah, that's awesome. Then there's a reason to take a stand against a horse that's never run at the age of 2. But we're in a different time and space. If you think Justify is the right horse, you go with Justify. If I wind up going with Audible, it's because of how I love his versatility. Close up on the Holy Bull, off the pace in the Florida Derby. He doesn't tip his hand in the morning as poorly as he was training before the Florida Derby. Visually, we all got the rug pulled out from underneath us. We did a webinar before the Florida Derby, and I gave you 18 reasons why to take a stand against Audible. If he looked like that and ran that well going into the Florida Derby, he's looked better in the mornings now as he's sitting on that much better of an effort. I think maybe the buyers a little bit, maybe could have come back a little bit stronger on Audible. All he does is win races. And in the end, I don't know why, maybe it's a coincidence. I don't know if it's what rhyme or reason it is, but this Florida Derby to the Kentucky Derby, since they moved it to 5 weeks out, that has been golden. From Barbaro, Two Big Brown, Nyquist, Always Dreaming, Orb. So for me right now, it is between those 2. And, I feel pretty good about leaning on Todd Pletcher in one direction and Bob Baffert in the other.
We'll come back to Laffit as we roundtable it and get into the Derby conversation. And Dan, start us off.
Yeah, so Craig, if you want to just go to True Odds and we could take a look at, I think any discussion about any race, but especially this one, probably begins with pace. While the favorites drew pretty well, all in all, I think everything going on from inside of Audible is sort of interesting. You've got Flame Away, who of course has a bit of pace, Promises Fulfilled. We all know is going to go. Forensic Fire. I spent a lot of time watching replays of all of his races dating back to last year. And what's interesting about Forensic Fire is that I think most of us think of him as sort of a mid-pack horse to even a closer. But a few strides out of the gate, he's usually in front. He breaks incredibly alertly. It's one of these things that's actually fascinating watching all these replays. And combine that with some of the sort of whispering I've heard, and the logic is that Frenzy Fire is probably going to be sent, which I think logically is, you've got nothing to lose, so may as well send. And again, combining that with the fact that Paco Lopez is riding, I think it just adds a little bit of spice to the early pace. Now, you're looking here on the race projection, and it's got Justify as sort of the clear, loose pace setter here. I personally, I understand and respect the fact that he's got this great natural speed, and he probably could be on the lead and be a length clear if he wants to be. Do I think that that's advisable? Probably not. And I think that there's going to be enough going on down at the rail to ensure that the pace is fairly hot, which of course you do see here in highlighted in red there, hot pace, and some of the other ones who could logically go and include Bravazzo and Noble Indy drawn out wide. I don't see any other plan for Noble Indy, of course, other than trying at least to keep up with some of the horses to his inside. So, that being said, I'm looking for a horse, maybe second or even third flight, who is going to let and who can allow all of this stuff to develop in front of him. And the horse that I landed on is Mendelssohn. I mentioned earlier that I was fortunate enough to be in Dubai World Cup night. Like you see a horse win by 18 plus lengths in front of your eyes. I mean, it probably had an impact on me. That is something that I can't really necessarily back up with numbers, but you do see, sort of the big numbers. If we look at Mendelssohn, we'll see, the massive Equibase speed figure. Like the bottom line is still a horse that's won on turf, synthetic, on the dirt, and he's won at 4 different racetracks. There's really nothing. I don't really know that there was an argument against. I remember going into the UAE Derby, all the sort of the naysayers were arguing that, look, how do we know that he can run on the dirt? And it's like, well, he's a half to beholder, and it's a mission. But yeah, we haven't seen it. Obviously, he's a horse who's we've thought of him as a turf horse. Here he is. He won the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Turf, and I just feel like there's been one excuse after another, or one sort of attempt to bring this horse down after another. And I just haven't seen any flaws. I think he might be a pretty spectacular horse. We might look back on this and say, damn, this horse won by 18 plus lengths, and we were questioning, how you would handle the travel over, and he's done this 3 or 4 times already. I mean, what were we concerned about? So, look, Mendelssohn is the horse for me. I think he'll get the setup. It's just a matter of, working out a trip, just like every other horse. When you have horses backing up, and you're having to figure out, how wide you're going to go, and which lanes to take. So, Mendelssohn's the pick for me. Good Magic is a horse that I've liked for a very long time. He isn't always the flashiest, but you look at the 109 and 108 Equibase speed figures, those are up there with these. And if you believe in progression and improvement, third start off the layoff, I think you could be looking at a peak effort here, which is clearly, I think, what Chad and the team had in mind with the break they gave him and starting him back in the Fountain of Youth, which was a race that I wasn't overly concerned about. The Bluegrass I thought was good, and if he can improve off of that, I think he's right there as well. He's another one who's tactical and can be used as Jose Ortiz sees best fit, and so I think he's one who's primed for a big race, and he's been impressive to me throughout. I mean, I put a line through the Fountain of Youth. I mean, that was, obviously it's the first race back off a long layoff. So those were the top 2 for me. And if I were to throw in a price, I've mentioned him a few times already, even earlier on the webinar, Flame Away. He's as game as they come. I think for him to really be a player late, he's going to have a run similar to his Tampa Bay Derby, where he sat a few lengths off. I think he's capable of that. It's just a matter of just not getting absolutely, crushed on the rail as horses start backing up. But if Jose Lezcano can put him in the right spot, and I don't know, that might be a big if, but I mean, if you can put him in the right spot and if you can work out a trip, the horse is all heart, and I think that he'll be overlooked, and he'll be a huge price, and I wouldn't be surprised if he kind of grinds his way into a second or third place finish. So those would be the top three for me.
Correct.
Yeah, so I'm one of the horses that Laffit liked is a horse I like, and that's Justify. I understand how the reason that the numbers on the true odds when Dan looked at them, where it has Justify having such a big lead, is just because when I use the race lens, I have it on I'm more used to the TrackMaster format, and I like to see the pace figures rather than the times. And so, I mean, these pace figures of 130, 124, 118, all these numbers are just, that's just so highly unusual for any type of young horse to run in their first starts that I know this horse just has a lot of pure natural early speed ability. So it's kind of like the last webinar when we had the Accelerate, and I forget the horse Stretching Out that we talked about, the one that won pretty easily, who we had projected on the lead, but he ended up just actually rating in sixth because he was coming off the sprints, and it was the mile in the eighth race, and he exploded down on the turn in the stretch. I'm blanking on the name, but this is similar to me as that. Is just kind of, this horse has a high cruising speed, and it isn't necessarily that he has to go the lead or anything. It's just wherever they put him, he's going to be comfortable early on. So I just don't think that the pace can bother him. I mean, other reasons, like Laffit said, his inexperience, no foundation, maybe only facing small fields, so we don't know. He hasn't been tested in that way. Maybe those types of things can get to him and he can get beat, but I just don't think that the early pace is going to be a problem for him, just because he's so naturally fast. The second horse I like is Good Magic, and that horse is I like for a lot of same reasons Dan said. I think this horse is a very handy horse. I just think with the traffic problems that horses can have in the Derby, like, I think this horse is made very well to overcome any kind of problem that may end up in his way. And so then there are just three more horses that I like to mention real quickly, and one is Bravazzo, and this one is just mainly a play just because D. Wayne Lucas is the trainer, and the horse, when you look at all these different categories here with these high ROIs, it's just, for me, when there's a chance at big odds with a horse, when a trainer has profit making potential in so many different areas, I want to throw that kind of horse into a race, and so that's why I would just throw that in. Mendelssohn, of course, looks strong to me, as for all the reasons Dan said. I guess I'm going to see how Raya does tomorrow, and that might influence how much I invest on Mendelssohn or how much I put into him. And then the last horse that I like is Installed Regard, and this horse too, I forgot to mention about Bravazzo. Two of the reasons I like these horses is just because of their sires, that they tend to breed long distance horses. So Awesome Again was Bravazzo's sire, and Arch has instilled regards to sire. And so that's just one of the reasons that I like the horse. I don't think he really had a chance in that last race. It was a front running track, and the rail was good. And I think when he had to go wide into the stretch, he really had no chance to make any type of move. And so I just gonna give that horse an outside chance to hit the board too. And so that's kind of the way that I see the Derby. Steve, your thoughts?
Well, I made commitment last week with the wagering guide that I contribute to every year, and Justify. I'm just only going to reiterate what I said earlier this evening. The time I spent on the West Coast, maybe Laffit doesn't want to come off as a hometown recruiter, but I'm happy to step up. I spend as much time at Santa Anita this winter as anybody, and being there for Justify's allowance win, being there for the Santa Anita Derby performance, and watching him come in here and just so naturally take on the role of favorite. He is so imposing, and barring something unusual, he can basically create his own trip. People are talking about the kinds of things that would trip him up with the lack of experience. What exactly is going to trip him up? I mean, even if he were to break a step slow, he's a big horse that is going to basically find his way to where he needs to be, and he's a tremendous tool, I think, in the hands of Mike Smith. Obviously, Baffert is adding a bit and headgear that is going to provide Smith with more control, and I don't envision him encountering a circumstance where he is so badly compromised that he can't win. I have reiterated for 2 weeks the people saying, "Oh, I can't take 3-1 on a horse with this experience level and all the things that could go against him." Okay, why are you going to take 9-2 on a horse coming from Dubai that could just as easily be as compromised? Or why are you going to take prices on any of these other horses that that aren't all that spectacular? I mean, if you want to tell me that you're going to bet Vino Rosso or Hofburg, okay, 15-1, 18-1, 20-1, that's fine. I had Paul Matisse, who's one of the best players in the country. His key horse is Lone Sailor at 32-1. That's a different approach. But to say, "Oh, I can't bet Justify because he's going to be 3-1," you're injuring your own potential for success, because he's the most likely winner if they run this race 100 times. And there's so many good things that can happen to you as a player if you just acknowledge that and you work with the other horses and the other prices that have got some things going for them, like Hofburg and like Good Magic. And then if you want to find horses that are going to either stay on, Dan talked about Flame Away. I compared him in the Express Bet Wagering Guide to Shackelford. That's exactly who he is. And he's a horse that probably is going to get a little weary late and probably gets passed by a couple of horses, or finds himself chasing a horse or two. But can he hang on for third or fourth? Yeah, I think he probably could. It's impossible not to be impressed with Good Magic and with Hofburg coming into this. If you're somebody that likes to utilize the eyes of the expertise of the Gary Youngs and the Mike Welshes and the Andy Harringtons and the best clockers that we have in the game, well, then both Good Magic and Hofburg need to be on your tickets somewhere. But to me, we're going to be treated. I'm going to be defensive with Mendelssohn. I think at first I thought the 14 hole was a good place for him. The more I thought about it, and when I talked with Donna Brothers, we had that post-draw show with Gary Young and Ed DeRosa, that open space can be a problem. And he may find himself engulfed. And if you look at his races, every time that he's run a subpar race, it's been when he has not gotten to the lead the way he obviously prefers. He had a dream trip in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile down on the rail in the juvenile turf and had a pretty much a clear path. If he does not have clear sailing, I think he's the horse that's much more compromised. I've got more confidence that Justify, should something go awry early, can work out a trip. I'll play Mendelssohn defensively, but Justify, good magic. Hofburg has moved up on my radar. Bolt D'Oro has moved down a little bit. I have not liked the way Bolt D'Oro has looked the last couple of mornings. That could change, but I'm thinking of him the same way, and I think Laffit will appreciate this, and Craig too, being West Coast guys of long standing. He's reminding me more and more daily of Brother Derek. He is this year's Brother Derek. And does that mean he can't win? No, but I have more doubts than I did a week ago about Bolt D'Oro the more I look. But to me, Justify, I think Mike Smith is in for a very big pair of days between Midnight Bisou and Justify. And no matter what, I think we're going to get a special Kentucky Derby. The weather forecast has improved markedly. Diminishing chance now of rain to deal with on Saturday. So everything looks free and clear for a tremendous Derby Oaks weekend. Laffit, some closing thoughts.
You have to handicap the man as well with Bob Baffert. You get the feeling like he feels like he has King Kong locked in a cage somewhere, ready to unleash him on 19 other horses. He's so confident. He's so loose, and not that that's always an indication of how these horses are going to run. I mean, he was the most surprised guy in the building when Point Given got beat. I remember bumping into him the night of the 09 Derby, and he was like in a daze. He was like in a fog. He was like, I can't believe Mine That Bird beat us. Like, I can't believe Mine That Bird beat us. What you can't count on is Baffert maximizing potential. And when he seems this confident, it's for a reason. And I'm not saying Justifies American Pharaoh. I'm not saying he's a Triple Crown winner. There's a reason this has not been done since the 1800s. I get that with the foundation and the experience, and Justify is going to experience things on Saturday that he's never seen. But when you combine the talent with the man running the show, that is a daunting obstacle when it comes to handicapping and trying to pick against Justify. You couldn't find three people to say two bad things about American Pharaoh a couple of years ago, and he closed as what, a 5-1 individual favorite and pulled for the Derby wager. Justifies 3-1, and the competition is much, much better. Baffert, Chad Brown, Jerry Bailey, all on record saying this is the best Derby they've ever been associated in terms of talent with the contenders. And I'm very interested to see what the money looks like tomorrow, because it's obviously it'll move from Friday to Saturday, but those trends and the directions of which the money is going can be a very true indication of what those odds are going to be as you get closer and closer to post time. Justify is strictly the one to beat. Just a quick rundown here. Obviously, Free Drop Billy has looked good. We'll see how far Promises Fulfilled can take this field. You have to love Flame Away's moxie and his willingness to fight. I told you I'm torn between Audible and Justify. Good magic. Look, you hate the phrase wise guy buzz horse, but it is what it is. And Chad Brown can't stop smiling. Good magic is a threat. Lone Sailor, great story. I don't know if he has the goods to compete with the likes of Mendelssohn, Justify, and the top horses in this field. I think Hofburg causes some damage late. My boy Jack, we'll see. Again, I told you I like how he accelerated on the turn at Fairgrounds and the Louisiana Derby. Those moves work here at Churchill Downs. The horse that you mentioned, Steve, that I'm torn on, Bolt D'Oro. Don't know what to expect. Don't know which way to go. Sometimes you just have to come to a conclusion that you're lost with the horse. I am lost with Bolt D'Oro. Enticed, if people like Vino Rosso, why is Enticed at 30-1, considering he was a 6-5 favorite in the Wood Memorial and ran second? Great story with Lucas and Bravazzo. Mendelssohn, he's the most hyped European Derby prospect we've seen since Arazi, I guess my one question is, did Mendelssohn leave too much on the track in the stretch at Medan? Is there ever any reason to run up the score to the tune of an 18.5 length victory? If you think that Smarty Jones's Preakness cost him the Belmont, maybe you feel like Mendelssohn did too much in the prep. Instilled Regard, can't see it. Magnum Moon, the drifting does bother me. Salamini, he's consistent but not as talented as some of the others. Vino Rosso is one that I've come around on a little bit. At first, I was very surprised when John Velasquez went that route instead of Audible, considering how highly they regarded, how much they've thought of Vino Rosso. Jerry Bailey said it on the show today. He went to visit Todd Pletcher earlier this winter, and he told them then they thought Vino Rosso was their best Derby prospect because of the 1.25 miles and what was expected of him as he continued to develop. You got him outside of Tampa, and we saw what he did back in New York. Noble Indy, I think he's underrated. He'll be maybe adding fuel to the fire from that outside post and combatant. I don't see him winning his second lifetime race in the Derby. So that's just a quick rundown here. Justify, strictly, in my opinion, the one to beat. It's the talent and handicapping the man who's won this race on 4 separate occasions.
Craig, final thoughts.
Yeah, I'm just excited for a big day of racing, and I'm on the same page with you as Justify. I mean, not does he just look great visually? I mean, his numbers are impressive as well. The type of pace figures he runs, and so expect big things from him. And I hope it's just gonna be a great day of racing, 2 days. So I'm excited about all of it.
Dan?
Yeah, it's same sentiments. Just have fun with it. This is such an incredible race. I mean, I feel like it's a much more exciting betting race than we've had in a couple of years. I think it could go any number of directions. It's always interesting to look back once it's over and kind of say, wow, what was I thinking with that one? Or, wow, like, this one may have had an excuse or two. And, how are things going to look in a few weeks from now as we head to Maryland? So great time of year, really excited. And if nothing else, bet River Boyne. And I think, Steve, you're giving refunds on losing tickets, right?
I might.
Okay.
I might. Laffit, before we go, the coverage layout the next 2 days on NBC and NBCSN.
Tomorrow, NBCSN at 12 Eastern. There'll be 3 hours. We'll have the 4 stakes races. Exciting to see. Always Dreaming. I think it's rare that you see a Derby winner back at Churchill Downs running as part of the undercard. We'll go 3 hours. I believe there is soccer for a couple of hours, and then we'll come back at 5 Eastern for the Kentucky Oaks. And on Saturday, it's all day. It's 7.5 hours. We get started at noon. And Eastern, the first 2.5 hours NBCSN, and then it's a full 5 hours of NBC. I've had a chance to see some of the features and some of what we're really going to highlight and emphasize in this year's Kentucky Derby, and extremely proud of the production, the show, and shining the kind of light on this event that it absolutely deserves.
Again, opportunity today, and anybody that is looking to subscribe, if you haven't, great opportunity right now, and only available today using the promo code Derby18. If you're a new subscriber, sign up right now and you'll get a second month free. It's $50 for a month, unlimited, completely unlimited. You can pull up every card that is of interest, and if you're a new subscriber, you get a second month free. That'll get you through the Triple Crown season. You should be following Stats Racelands, of course, on Twitter. And any questions you've got, Craig and the development team and everybody, myself, Ellis Starr, you should look for Ellis's analysis at Equibase for the entire weekend, and follow Uber Capper as well, and Anonymous Man. I'm Steve Byk, back tomorrow morning, 9 a.m., Sirius XM. And we wish everybody a wonderful Oaks Derby weekend. Be sure to fund your account early Don't wait until Saturday if you're going to fund your ADW account. Get out ahead of that. You don't want to get caught short, and make sure no matter what happens, don't get down on yourself at any point. This is like a Breeders' Cup weekend. We say this on Breeders' Cup all the time. I write it when I put up my analysis. It's only going to take one double, one pick three, one 50-cent trifecta. Everything will pay exponentially larger with the kind of pools and the kind of extraneous coverage there is. And when it comes to the Derby, listen, it's great to pick a Derby winner and have that to talk about for years. But this is not the ultimate test of your handicapping ability, and your future as a horse player is not decided by the outcome on Saturday in the feature race. But it's great opportunities the next 48 hours, and we hope that everybody gets lucky. Can't thank you enough for joining us. Another fun hour and 45 minutes, exactly what we did last year. We can't help but be excited talking about these races and about Stats Racelands, which is a tool that'll make you a better player and will help you cash more tickets. And everybody involved at Equibase and at Stats is looking to help you be a better player. Good luck this weekend, everybody. Talk to you tomorrow from Churchill Downs, 9 o'clock at the races. Thanks so much.
Thanks so much, guys. Good luck, everybody.
Hey, good luck.